You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show at this very late hour. That's right. I mean, we just, it's just, I'm sorry. It's necessary for a little while. Maybe we can return to our normal 8 o'clock time slot on Friday. But for a while, like I said, you guys are just going to have to, catch up to us, keep up with us. We've been trying to get on as early as 10 o'clock on Fridays, but a lot of times it's 11. I might just start calling it at 11 from now on until further notice, just, so it's all worked out. But, hey, you don't look too tired for Friday night at 11.
Because I'm pumped to talk about this episode.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, that's the thing. Today was like a crazy, tiring, brutal day for me, but you know what? The whole time,
same here.
I'm just like, you know what? I can't wait to talk about this episode. So, I mean, this, I think, is a major step up from what we've been getting. And some of the things that we've been getting, a lot of the criticisms still stand, don't get me wrong. But I think that some of the things, particularly with the Ahsoka's character, has been explained a little bit. There was a little bit of a tease, actually. I think it was when we were still doing the whole, a lot of the shows leading up to this series, basically. And I remember there was something we were talking about where we were reading where they're almost going to pull a little Gandalf thing. Where it's going to be Ahsoka the Gray and Ahsoka the White. And we've actually gotten that now. That's basically what's happened. So, I mean, there's just like a lot to unpack in this episode. But overall, yeah, I thought it was a step up. The only criticism that I really had was I really wish that Nick Gillard had done the lightsaber choreography like he did in that was definitely missed for me. I could definitely tell. You could tell that Hayden Christensen retained a lot of those moves.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
And of course he trained for this, obviously. But it just, I don't know, it just missed that extra something. And I think that would have bridged the continuity of the prequels. There might have been some other things here and there, but for the most part, I mean, I was really into this episode, and I thought, yeah, this is what Ahsoka should be. You?
Yeah. To be honest with you, Eric, I initially didn't like this episode.
Wow.
I didn't like it. I was ready to wash my hands of it. Honestly, I was ready to wash my hands of Ahsoka based upon this episode after my first viewing. And then upon the second viewing, I said, okay, well, let me try to really pay attention to the nuances of it. And I ended up really, really enjoying this episode. It did a complete 180 for me. I originally, things that I thought there were problems were no longer there, but then there are still some things that are still problems, and you alluded to, and I'll just give an example. And when we get into this, I'll really kind of explore into it, but there's questions that still weren't answered. So, yeah, I'm gonna go with that. And then, but yeah, I really eventually did enjoy this episode. And then I was curious to see, ask some of my friends, who are fans of the series, ask them, hey, what did you think? They were like, oh man, loved it. It was really super cool. I do agree with you. Missing Nick as the stunt choreographer or the fight scene choreographer was really missed. And I think Hayden Christensen did a phenomenal job with that. I think Rosario Dawson could have really truly benefited from that to make it at least more even.
Yeah, but here's
I
the
get
thing.
it. At one point, the story that they were trying to tell it made sense.
Yeah, and that's
So
I'm willing to give a lot of slack,
grace,
because
grace.
of this Ahsoka the Gray, Ahsoka the White thing. Like, I'm starting to understand now. Like, I mean, again, don't get me wrong. A lot of the criticisms that we talked about in episodes 1 through 4 are still very much there and still very much a thing.
Mm-hmm.
However, particularly where Ahsoka is concerned, because a lot of it, I was, really critical of, the lack of emotion and just kind of the stoic nature and all that. I'm starting to see now that that's intentional, that's very much an intentional thing. That, of course, when we get into this episode with everybody that's watching, we actually have a pretty decent amount of people. What we don't have is a decent amount of likes yet. So, much like the fact that we love this episode, we hope you guys love this episode and are willing to hit that like button now, and then also hit the subscribe button. So, yeah, now, of course, starting us off, so, Dragonfly Mask, of course, is joining us tonight. We want to say hey. And, Ronaldo is joining us, and he has a comment. He basically says, I really love this very much. Was it perfect? No. Some of the dialogue needs to improve, and some things need to be explained. But overall, it was very enjoyable. And honestly, that's a really good...
Oh, yeah.
That's a good, that's a good summation of this episode, actually. There are some definite dialogue issues, and there's some story issues that are sprinkled throughout. But now you watch, it's funny because Star Wars Theory, he's kind of like the guy that all of us Star Wars shows aspire to be, right? He's got like millions of followers, he gets like millions of views constantly. Star Wars actually knows who he is, and occasionally will either support him or go to war with him, depending on. He also made some of these like great fan films, like those Vader ones. Mm-hmm. So he's a guy that we all aspire to be. He even did like this whole watch party with this episode, this live watch party with all of his viewers and stuff. And I happen, because sometimes, I'll watch different YouTubers and try to get, their take on it and stuff. He was just like, to him, this is like the best Star Wars since Disney took over. And
no,
even though I don't agree with that assessment, I do understand, though, why he said that, because I think there's a lot of promise in this and the direction they're going and the attention. And again, we'll get into that as we go on. But I do think that, even though that would definitely be an overstatement, I mean, that's just kind of like, all right, man, just, put the brakes on it a little bit here. But I don't know. Dragonfly Mask writes in and says, felt like she was starting to believe in the will of the Force for the first time. Well, that's kind of it, right? So the whole idea behind the Ahsoka the Gray thing versus now Ahsoka the White, they were alluding to this before, but the idea is, and if you notice in the episode, Anakin kept repeating, if you want to live, if you want to live, it's kind of like you understand that actually Ahsoka has been more about survival than actually living. And they've been accentuating this, which was a complete oversight on my part, actually, because even though I read about all this, it completely escaped me that she was wearing mostly gray through these first 4 or 5 episodes. And then, of course, when this episode concludes, she's got like the white cloak and, her whole attitude is different. And so this is the episode where she actually goes from that, I'm just trying to survive. It's the aftermath. I resent my former master for turning into Vader and all this stuff. And of course, they all this is confronted directly, actually, in this episode. But I thought that was a really nice transition. That it was something that, again, initially I was very critical of. Like, really, dude? Why is Ahsoka so, just statuesque and, I mean, just like a dead fish, right? I mean, she's got all the personality of, the sand on Tatooine, basically. Yeah. And it's just like, what's going on? I mean, this is not the Ahsoka that we all know. It wasn't even really the Ahsoka that we had seen totally in The Mandalorian. you know? But now I'm like, oh, yeah, all right, fine. That was intentional. You know, it escaped me. My bad, whatever. All right, so Ronaldo's got a couple of comments here that I want to get to before we really start to sail into this with everybody. He says, I understand if somebody says it's the best Star Wars since Disney took over. There's a lot of good stuff. But I still think the best is Andor. And I think that, and you and I say this all the time, it really depends on what you're looking for out of Star Wars. Now, if you're going to say some of the best writing, performances, all that, yeah, hands down, Andor, like, kills all of them. I mean, Andor is the thing that you would actually play for non-Star Wars fans and say, this is what this is capable of. However, you know, again, I mean, part of Star Wars is the whole fun, action, adventure, you know, that kind of thing. So a lot of other people might point to The Mandalorian. A lot of people would point to Rogue One, which, you know, I guess Andor's technically in that, but, you know, there's a lot. It just depends on really what you're looking for. You know, like David would not agree with you.
I don't know. Based on last episode, he just might.
Yeah, he might actually. We'll have to see if he chats in tonight. Ronaldo goes on to say, nothing. Yeah, something. What happened to our chat? Well, here, let me go to this one and see if. Oh, all right. Well, all right. I'll just have to read these, I guess. I don't know what happened to her. We were doing so well. Ronaldo said, I love the Clone Wars stuff. All the flashbacks worked very well, and I think this is the best fighting choreography we've seen for Anakin. Not if you're counting the prequels. And that is actually one of the things, is that had Nick Gillard, who actually was the guy who did the fight choreography in the prequels, that was one of the things that sort of took me out of this, to be honest. Now, don't get me wrong, this is probably some of the best fight choreography we've seen, you know, like when you're counting the sequels and maybe some of the earlier Ahsoka battles and stuff like that, sure. But I think it really depends on what you're comparing. He says, one negative thing is that the world between worlds needs to be explained. It's very confusing. So, if you remember from your Clone Wars days, the way that the only real explanation that was given was when Palpatine actually explained it in an episode. And he basically said it's kind of like a purgatory kind of thing. It's like the land between the living and the dead, I think is how Palpatine put it. And so what the world between worlds is more like an in-between. Some say it's an embodiment of the Force. And in fact, there's a lot of people who are theorizing, honestly, that Anakin is really like the father, you know, from that father, sister, brother, Force, whatever. He's kind of like the new one. And, you know, I think it's one of those situations where that's a possibility. I doubt it. I think that in this case, Anakin is just, you know, he's basically, as we see later in the episode, he's actually both Anakin and Vader, right? Because there's definite
duality.
Yeah, there's like a duality there. And, you know, there's a lot of I thought there was a lot of funny lines. I mean, I'm trying to think of what else bothered me in this one. I know one thing that bothered me. I'm curious if it bothered you or not. Is that I really didn't like the fact that, you remember when Jason was able to hear the lightsaber battles, and I didn't mind that.
That was nope. I had a problem with Hera hearing it though.
Exactly.
Yep.
That was my issue.
Exactly. I knew you were going there. I was just like, come on,
yeah, man. I had a huge problem with Hera hearing
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
I mean, that was like
it would have made more sense if Hera would have just trusted Jason. I think that would have done better story-wise if Hera would have actually just trusted her son. Like, you know, he has abilities that I don't have, but I know what those abilities are like because I've been around it enough.
Sure.
So exactly. I'm going to go out on a limb like, okay, the fact that he's not only just hearing things, but he's hearing something specific. It's like, oh, Mom, do you hear that noise? And he's like, what, the waves? Like, no, lightsabers crashing, and he's just like, see, that would have, as Hera, as a mother, and as someone who's been around and of course doing Rebels, that would have been like, okay, it's believable if she would have just trusted her son. And that's what I love, and it would have gave more it would give even more credence to what happens right after, which I thought was a hilarious thing. When Carson was just like, what the heck are we doing? And he's just like, his father was a Jedi, and he's just like, oh, well, all right. And
Yeah,
just kind of
exactly.
just,
Well, there's
I
a
thought
lot
that
of
was
good comedy in this. There was a lot of
his
good
reaction
comedy.
to it was priceless.
Yeah, his reaction was great. And I mean, honestly, look, if Hera maybe, they showed her like dropping a couple of death sticks before going out there or something, and it's just kind of like, yeah, okay, I hear some like, that kind of thing, I might have been okay with it, right? But
Has some
yeah,
spice.
but the fact that she's got like that's kind of my problem actually with this whole series so far. I'm still honestly having a hard it goes back and forth for me. So on one hand, I'm still having a little bit of a difficult time that Sabine is training to be a Jedi. I'm not 100% into that. On the other hand, they do actually make it like she's just the worst student ever. Like she can't do anything. So I mean that sort of counteracts it a little bit. Let me see if I can put up this chat. Oh, here we go. It's working again. So Dwight joins us. He said Filoni said he wanted to leave the world between worlds loose. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You do get that explanation from Palpatine, but it's not like 100% defined. And I think that a lot of it, I think it's up to a little bit of interpretation there, certainly. One of the things, of course, now I don't know if they did this because maybe they just didn't have the budget to do it or something, but I noticed that the difference between the world between worlds that we get here is you get they did a pretty good job, I thought, depicting it in live action. But what's missing is the portals, and I wonder if that's on purpose.
It could be.
Or if it's like a budgetary, like, look, we're doing this in the volume. We've only got so much money. You're going to get walkways, but no portals.
Or this could be a different section of we don't know how expansive it is. So,
well, it's supposed to be infinite, side of it so yeah.
So it's one of those things where they could be on one side of the thing. Maybe the portals are on the other side. We don't know. But
yeah, we don't know. We really don't know.
My biggest thing though is, see, the problem with the world, and this is one of my big issues with it, was, okay, you established the world between worlds in Rebels.
Yeah.
That was a Rebels thing. So you have this whole rock where, you got to use the Force and, do all this stuff to access it. That was a whole storyline for like 2 episodes. And then now, you mean to tell me, oh, all I could do was pass out or something, and now I'm in the world between? It just seems like it's just convenient. That's all. So part of me wonders.
Yeah.
Part of me wonders this: was she really in the world between worlds, or was she just having some sort of out of body experience? And
she was having an out of body experience. Well, yeah, because they do find her in the ocean or whatever that body of water is at the end of the episode. So right.
if you have her like almost like unconscious, and her subconscious is conjuring up like, okay, for her it would make sense for Anakin to see her in the world between worlds. You know what I mean? Like,
well, she's been there too, so
that's what I'm saying. So it makes sense that, okay, if I were to see my old master and have a conversation with him, it's almost no different than, when some of us have lost loved ones, and some of us might have thought like, man, it'd be great to talk to my grandmother or my dad or my mom again. And you kind of envision in your head, like in a dream, like, man, what if we were in heaven just having this conversation or something like that? I would just love to have that. To me, that's what this kind of was more symbolic of. I don't know if this actually was the world between worlds, because if it is, then it's almost like you can, like, at what juncture do you just access it?
Well, but they
because now you
haven't.
have to.
I mean, I know, but they haven't really. I mean, look, there is plenty of precedence in Star Wars, and I will say this: I think it would be a mistake if it's not the world between worlds.
No, if it is, I'm fine with that. But my thing is, I'm fine if it's the world between worlds. What I'm saying
Like, how'd
is
she get
that
there?
it's a dream that she's having, not she's actually there. If that makes
Well,
sense.
yeah, I mean, I get the nuances. It's just I don't know. I don't know if that would be a good idea. Well, first of all, I thought that they brought the world between worlds in too early. I mean, I think I alluded to that. What were we doing Monday? What was our show? This is terrible, but I don't remember. What was the show? Oh, The Acolyte.
Yeah.
So I remember it might have been during that or something, but I remember when we knew, or maybe it was at the end of the last Ahsoka review, where I basically knew, like, okay, we know we're going to see the world between. I thought that maybe they were bringing it in a tad too early if it was going to be in this episode, which it was. But the fact that it
Hmm.
is, I don't necessarily know if, um, I don't know if it would be a good idea if it wasn't that she was actually there. Now, how she accessed it, again, it could be that Anakin brought her there, because of course the first thing that he opens up with is like, yeah, you kind of lost that fight pretty bad.
But then he even said, "I'm surprised to see." I mean, granted, I'm surprised to see you here
Well,
so
that's
soon, or
true.
something like that. So
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Like,
I
to
know.
me, and this is the problem I have. It's like, okay, if you establish something, you have to establish that, like, okay, it's already been established that, okay, the world between worlds lied behind this painting or whatever that was on, Lethal.
Hmm.
All right. So if you're establishing that that's where it is, and then, um, if I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to think about that episode. The episode where Ezra he walked into that temple, that's when Palpatine was trying to talk to him and trying to convince him that his parents were on the other side. He was out of the world between worlds at that point. He was in like some makeshift temple or whatever the case may be.
Yes.
So that was different. So my whole thing is this: if you establish that the world between worlds is on Lethal and it's behind this painting or this wall that you have to, you know, use the force to access it, and it has, that's fine. But then you can't just drop people into it whenever you want, because now it completely negates this whole entrance thing.
Yeah, and this is even more of a case of, usually I would chalk it up to, well, Filoni is not exactly experienced in live action, but this would actually be even a stupid move for animation too.
Well, it's a
But,
storytelling thing, and
well,
that's what I'm
yeah,
saying.
that's
Like,
what I mean.
is it lazy writing? Is it, what I
Yeah.
mean? And that's where we start getting into that whole conversation yet again. Is, are we just making things convenient just because it's like, well, I want to put them here. Well, how would I do it? Like now, like I said, I think the way to do it would be have her, you know, she's incapacitated and she's dreaming of something, because we've seen it in movies hundreds of times where our hero gets knocked unconscious and they hear the voices of their old master or whatever, and then they get whatever knowledge that they had, and then they snap back to reality and look, oh, I'm a brand new person again, and now I know what I must do. We've seen that hundreds and hundreds of times, which we know that's fine because Star Wars uses familiar story tropes. So that's, if that's what happens, I'm cool with that. But let that be the explanation. But if you just mean to tell me that she falls off a cliff and then all of a sudden she's in the world between worlds.
Well, this is a problem I have with the world between worlds. See, Lucas, being the master storyteller he is, he would just have these force ghosts like pop up, right? Obi-Wan needs to tell Luke to go to Dagobah. So, Luke is a little out of it on
Yeah.
Hoth. So he just sort of pops up. Hey, man, you got to go to this planet Dagobah. You're going to talk to Yoda. He's going to hook you up. Everything's going to be cool. Okay. Then he disappears. Then, of course, in Return of the Jedi, it's like Luke is getting a little despondent after Yoda dies, and he's getting a little upset, and then Obi-Wan appears, and it's like, all right, look,
Mm-hmm.
let's chill on this log for a second. I'm going to share some things with you and send you on your way. The whole world between worlds thing, it's still within the realm of fantasy, but I don't know. I just think that it creates more problems than it solves within a story arc or whatever. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like now you got to explain too much, and how does this work? And I mean, especially with as much as we've seen it, it's kind of like you alluded to, right? It's a plot device that Filoni uses to get from one step to the next, and then bails on it. Like we saw it in that one episode, or maybe it was a couple. I don't exactly
Yeah,
remember
it's
if it
like
was.
two. It was like two because the first one
It
was
was
that
a
they were
story arc,
trying to.
right?
Yeah, they were trying to figure out because that one acolyte was actually trying to get into it,
Yeah,
and he couldn't figure it out. And he kept asking Sabine to kind of
that's right.
decipher the whole painting.
Yep, that's what it was. Okay, but still, it was only a couple episodes though, and then it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then we never nobody's used it. Like none of the Jedi, Luke is around. Like none of these guys have used it, and then all of a sudden, Ahsoka gets a little boo-boo in a battle, and all of a sudden, boom, she's in the world between worlds. So we don't even have a fully established, like, when does this happen?
Exactly.
And how is it happening and all that? It just becomes this, could be lazy, but then again, to play devil's advocate here for a second, much like I was a little bit overly critical about the whole Ahsoka thing in episodes 1 through 4, at least her attitude, now that I have a little bit more information, I'm like, oh, well, that's kind of on purpose.
Well, that's my thing. It's like you got to give us the information, in order to now. If that may come in subsequent episodes, I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. That's my point, and that's the reason why, like you, I have some issues with it. Like it was cool. And it, you got the little warm and fuzzy fan feelings when you saw Anakin, and he's calling her Snips, and your head's exploding because this is the first time Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker is using. Is no different than in The Last Jedi when Luke uttered the name Darth Sidious, and you're just like, your mind's melting because of it. For those of us who are of that heavier fan persuasion, those are the kinds of things that really. Or, when Han Solo starts talking about Palpatine and all this stuff, you're just like, oh, this is so cool because it's that connective tissue that you really enjoy and that is actually rewarding as a fan. But, you do have to do this in a logical storytelling kind of a way, or it can feel cheap. Now, we got a gang of texts or messages or whatever they are.
Chats.
There you go. Look, guys, it's late. Fortunately, I'm awake during this thing, right? So Ronaldo says, one negative thing is that the world between worlds needs to be explained. It's very confusing. Well, yeah. That's basically what we were just talking about, right? Like, you have to put... And I'm not saying that it needs some, like, super expository, like, laid out or anything like that, but you got to give us at least some parameters of the world between worlds. That's all. Let's see. Dragonfly Mask says, I like that Andor and Rogue One showcase the espionage side of Star Wars. That's true. But the mainline movies talk about happening in the background. And that's actually one of the cooler things, I think, that definitely happened in things like Rogue One, and Andor, of course, continues this, is that you're seeing, it's not even just the war part of it, right? It's that whole political thriller, espionage, kind of James Bondish, Jason Bourne, that kind of thing.
It's a setup. It's kind of like, okay, this is how all this came about.
Yeah. And then, of course, Ronaldo goes on to say, I think this fighting style is more clean and believable for my taste, at least. I can understand being that the prequels were over the top by design, because obviously this is supposed to be the zenith, or at least one of them, of the Jedi. You had to have that kind of crazy over the top, fighting or whatever. I could see where you might feel like, okay, yeah, let's tone it down a little bit, give it a little bit more of a clean or a straight ahead fighting style. But it just felt a little awkward to me because you have to remember. I mean, even in the whole flashback, right? When she turns into young Ahsoka, he's like, do you want to live or whatever? And they're doing the exchange. I mean, essentially, that's a live action flashback to their first adventure, like that. What's it
Mm-hmm.
called? Ryloth or something, whatever that planet was. And,
Mm-hmm.
that was the first battle, actually. And so you have to depict a fighting style. I mean, granted, in the World Between Worlds it isn't, but it just, I don't know. And again, you also have to factor in the fact that he did have to relearn his whole fighting style as Darth Vader in the suit, and it would be kind of weird now for him to go back to being like, oh, I got all my limbs and wonder how this works. Again, it's another World Between World things that they have to talk about. Let's see. Ronaldo says, I remember in Rebels, Sabine was easily controlled by her anger, so it kind of makes sense to me. Yeah, well, it would, from that standpoint, it would maybe make more sense as a Sith Lord. Now, don't get me wrong, who was it Paz Vizsla? Who was the first Mandalorian Jedi, the one that created the
Tar
darksaber?
Vizsla.
Tar Vizsla. Yeah. So look, it's not unprecedented that a Mandalorian becomes a Jedi. It's just, see, to me, it's a stretch, right? Because Kanan was teaching her more like swordsmanship and combat skills so she can accurately wield the dark saber. But he wasn't necessarily, I mean, it's been so long since I've seen it. Was there any point where somebody was training her to be a full-blown Jedi in that thing?
No, but I think to that point though, I think what's going to happen possibly, and is that Ahsoka is going to realize that that's not who Sabine is. And we kind of got glimpses of that before. He's like, I don't need her to be this. I need her to be who she is.
Right.
And being a Mandalorian, being able to wield a dark saber, like that's fine enough. Like she's super talented. She doesn't. It's not her. It may not be her destiny to become a Jedi or to use the Force in that way, and that's why she doesn't have the propensity to do it because that's not her destiny.
Yeah, well, if you
I
listen
think
to
Ahsoka. I think
Hu
Ahsoka is just
Yang
trying to
basically
compensate.
agrees.
Yeah, I think Ahsoka is just trying to like compensate for that, and I think even Anakin even addressed it because when he said when Ahsoka brought up if I have a Padawan, he's like, do you even want a Padawan? And they kind of dealt with that, and I think that's part of what's holding Ahsoka back from actually training training Sabine the way that Sabine needs to be trained is because she's afraid that she's going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to kind of turn the tide just a little bit. And we talked about the veggies. Let's get to some of the desserts of this episode because there's a lot of them.
Well, before we do that, like I said, I got this whole gang of chat, so we just got to get through here. There's a lot. Dwight says that even he knew a Jedi, the weirder the plan, the more it will work. I can't remember who said that. Yeah, I don't. I do
Oh,
remember that line.
yeah. I think it was a clone trooper.
Yeah, it could be.
I think it was one of the clone troopers that said it.
That could be.
Might have been like Rex or something.
Yeah, that sounds like something a clone trooper would say. Ronaldo says, "Don't get me wrong. I prefer that she wasn't a Padawan." Um, yeah. Well, I mean, and I think you're on the right track actually. That Ahsoka's probably learning. Like, look, you know, maybe I don't need to be so hardcore with this. Ronaldo goes on to say, "I think she was literally in there, meaning the world between worlds. Haven't explained how it works. Well, um, it's like sometimes it seems like you can access other person's memories, and other time it's literally time travel." And then he goes on to say, "I wonder, what do you think of the everybody being able to use the Force? Seems like Sabine is able to use it if she trains enough. And Jason can do it because his father was a Jedi. Well, and again, I mean, I think if you go back to that midi-chlorian thing that George Lucas got it right episode that was actually wildly popular on this channel, it basically goes back to what Obi-Wan said, right? And what I think that Bryan Johnson was latching onto when he created the Broom Kid and all that stuff. It was basically like the Force, there is that you must be this tall to ride this ride kind of a thing going, right? I mean, your midi-chlorian count has to be like X before the Jedi will even pay attention to you kind of a thing. Because that's to be able to harness the Force at a Jedi level is a thing. But, the Force is in everybody, and everybody has some midi-chlorian count. I mean, even Watto. I forgot. I remember there was like some book. It was like some official encyclopedia or whatever that was given. Part of what they would do is give the midi-chlorian counts of all these Star Wars characters. They even gave it to like Watto. Watto had some. I don't remember what it was. It wasn't, the temple wasn't going to be knocking on his door anytime soon. But the point that was made was that, anybody can basically do it and use the Force. It's not just a Jedi Sith thing. I think that's, let's see. Ronaldo goes on to say, I know George said it's like, yeah, I think he means Yoda. Oh, yoga, actually. Everybody can do it. But do you think that's a good idea? I don't know. You think it's a good idea?
Well, no. I mean, wasn't going to go with yoga, but I was going to say like running. Like, okay, everybody can run just about, unless you don't have any like obviously like handicaps or physical impairments or whatever. But by and large, most people can run. Now, some people can run just, as a normal body, like fight or flight type thing. Then there's people who can run because, hey, they practice and they go jogging, and that's just one of the ways that they release and, their stress or whatever. And then there's some people who are born to run. There are people who are like Olympic athletes, and it's like, okay, just because you can run does not mean you're going to, and you can practice all you want, but that doesn't mean you're going to be an Olympic world-class athlete. It's like some people just have that, what they call in sports, that it factor. And that's kind of what the midichlorian thing represents. It's like, okay, you have this it factor that puts you above the normal population. You're an elite individual. It's like intelligence, same thing. Some people are just naturally born super intelligent, and so that's just their particular gift. And that's what they always talk about, with the Force. It's like, oh, he has a gift or she has a gift. It's because it's exactly what it is. It's something that everyone has, but they just have a little bit more of it, which allows them to then do more.
Yeah. No, I agree. Dwight basically says the world between worlds has different access points. Lethal wouldn't be the only way into that space. Which, I mean, I think that we're fine with that. I think what we're talking about is we just need more. I mean, you fall off a platform and suddenly you're in the world between worlds. I mean, it's just like, all right, where, how do you get into that,
Where's the line?
situation? Yeah, because that wasn't a conscious, okay, looks like a long way down, time to go to world between worlds. I mean, it's not like that. It's like, it's almost like, how did she get there? I think that we can all agree that, yes, I mean, there are other portals because things supposed to be this infinite space in between life and death or whatever. So, yeah, absolutely. Okay, Ronaldo says, Dave Filoni said the world between worlds is not time travel, but we've seen in Rebels and now in Ahsoka that you can literally grab someone from another timeline. And I do remember that in Rebels, because that was one of the things that... And, I also do remember that there were multiple timelines, right? They were seeing, it's almost like a multiverse kind of a thing. So, and I don't mind the fact that they're keeping it a little vague. I actually enjoy that because, look, I don't want it to be sci-fi. I don't need the schematics of the world between worlds, right? I don't mind if they keep that a little bit fantasy. However, the best fantasy I mean, even George Lucas's version of Star Wars always had explanations, some rules, some parameters, something to guide, this basically esoteric kind of thing. Then Dwight says, Filoni uses it to save Ahsoka. She was saved both times it was shown, right?
That is very true. First it was Ezra, now it's Anakin.
Well, yeah. He goes on to say it's Maury's world. That's great. And then, of course, we get, our good friend David. David, misguided David. David says, Hello, gentlemen. Sorry I'm late. Did y'all apologize yet? Are you all ready to admit defeat? Or are we still wishing upon the Death Star? That was a nice touch, by the way, especially with the Disney connection. I like that. Has it been enough time to say that the show sucks? I will say this. It has been enough time to decide whether or not you like it and like the direction of it. I mean, look, we're like 70% in, right? There's 8 episodes, I think. And this is episode 5, so we only have 3 episodes left. So, yeah, I mean, you're at the point now where you could say, like, am I enjoying the direction of this show? Is this something that's for me? Is it, do the issues, the definite issues, and of course, David, you might have missed it earlier when we said, look, there were certain things that are issues, okay? All through this thing, there's problems. But there are also other things, particularly where Ahsoka is concerned, that what we thought were issues were actually deliberate storyline things. So, from that standpoint, it was kind of like, oh, all right, we got a little bit more information. I will say that I don't think that you can make a definitive conclusion until we're reviewing the last episode, because that's when you have the whole thing, end to end. Now you can make a true assessment of the show. But yeah, I think you can.
I would say this. I think that Ahsoka is an average show.
Yeah.
I don't so far at this juncture, I can say it's maybe average, slightly below. So if I had to give it a grade right now, it would get like maybe a D+ for me.
Well, being that we go by our number systems, we're always rating things on a scale of 1 to 10, right?
Right.
What do you give it right now? Oh, I can hear it. I feel your. I want to go all emperor on you right now.
But that is your favorite dark side guy.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I will say, I would say it's middle of the road. I say it's 5.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and it could go like right now. Even when you factor in episode 5, I don't know. I might actually give it a 6 at this point, because
4 and 5 showed me like, okay, it heightened the potential.
Exactly, and I think that's the problem. This show has, it's like endless. It's just all it is potential, right? Every episode that we review, we go, there are some cool things. Here's the gazillion problems that we're just gonna pretty much, illustrate for the whole show, right? We're just gonna wail on this thing for a while, but we always end it by going, but you know what? It's got potential. It can still do something. The problem is that we're starting to get to the end of the season. We have 3 episodes left. So if it's going to show us that potential, and look, we could even say, like, let's just say the season finale, we're just kind of like, we could still say, look, this thing has got potential for season 2. I mean, just the storyline and where it is in the universe, like the timeline and all that stuff, there's a ton of potential. It's just suffering from some bad writing and performances. That's all.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say that my personal prediction is that we're gonna leave Ahsoka with maybe a C plus.
If you're going by letter grade,
And we're going by letter grade. I think we're gonna end with a finale when it's all buttoned up, because the last 3 episodes have to be explosive. It just has to be,
well, I think
and
they
even to
will
get to
be
that point.
because you still got
I'm just saying, but
Thrawn. You're just saying
well, yeah,
it's a requirement at this point.
but yeah, it's what I mean by I mean explosive. I mean, like, it has to hit. The story can't suck. It can't have all these wacky little. I mean, it's got to be like, it's fourth quarter. We need every first down we can get. You know what I mean? And we need to score now. And that's my whole
It's a
gist
typical
with
Lions
this.
game, basically. It's like kind of in the
Right.
last quarter. It's like, all right, guys,
Yeah,
there's
I
only
mean,
like
Matthew
4 minutes
Stafford
on the
this
clock
thing.
here. You gotta do some. Now's the time,
Right.
So yeah,
Because even if it's a win, even if it does come out like, okay, you know what, the last 3 episodes were phenomenal.
mhm.
Like, even I take even into consideration that, like, okay, some of the issues that David and myself and even you, Eric, talked about, as far as like, okay, her wooden her wooden disposition, even if that's, you could show that, well, not even show that, not show it woodenly, but you can,
Woodenly. I'm gonna have to use that word.
yes, um it's one of those things where you can showcase that emotion in a better way.
Oh yeah,
The problem is, and that's the problem. So it's like, I get the fact, and I even told David, I said, look, right on the onset of this thing, I said, Ahsoka is in a place where she's kind of like in mourning. She's kind of in
yeah,
a sunken place in
yes,
a way,
defeated,
and she's
like a
in a,
victim.
yeah,
She's just
very,
surviving.
yeah, she's surviving. She's just holding on, and she's trying to just, and that explains her very melancholy disposition. However, it could be illustrated or maybe even explained a little bit more or acted out a little bit more thoroughly, where it's clear that that's what it is, as
Yeah,
opposed to it being so wooden. And now, coupled with the fact that we have bad dialogue, coupled with the fact that we have horrible writing in a lot of spots, coupled with that, we have technical issues, like some of the CG stuff is just like, you know what I mean? It's those things that,
I know.
that pile up,
Yeah,
that causes, like, that's why I said, like, the last 3 have to hit. Otherwise, it is a failed show.
well, and I think what you could do is you could say it like this: the last 3 episodes have to be executed flawlessly in order for the show to be salvaged. And
Mm-hmm.
I have my doubts.
I do too.
Dwight says, how even Mortis' arc had a world between world feel to it, especially in relation to time. That's a good point, actually. She was resurrected there also.
Yep.
And then he says,
Yeah,
the
not
payoff,
doing his baby.
right? The payoff for season 1, unfortunately, will be in season 2. Because of that, I almost don't mind the pacing. And that's a good point. And it's something that we alluded to, I think, in the second episode when we were reviewing that. I could be wrong, though. I know maybe it wasn't even when we were doing this. I know it was at some point. I know we were doing the show, though, because I said it might have been when we were still speculating. I remember saying that it might be the long game. It might be that you don't get the payoff in season 1, that maybe the payoff does come in season 2, that season 1 is like a setup. And then, I mean, now you can make that argument with Andor too, and Andor is much better written. Because in Andor season 2, you're going to get K2SO. It's going to be like the bridge to Rogue One. It's going to be, you know what I mean? There's like that payoff there too.
Sure, but I think the problem is that, see, in this day and age, you have to capture people, and that's the thing. It's like, if you wait too long, people are going to change the channel and put on something else. They're going to watch Breaking Bad or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is not the time period that you could do that. It's not 3 channels anymore, and
Exactly. Like everybody has, all this streaming ability to cut on any movie or any series that they want to watch. And it's like if you don't grab people, you're going to lose them. And that's the unfortunate. And even with some things, it's like, okay, there is the promise, there is the potential. And like I said, getting to the desserts of this episode, because I don't want to just spend this whole episode bagging on it, but there were
No,
tons of
we
things that were
won't.
really great, about this episode.
Yeah, we'll get to them. Dragonfly Mass said, the story, plot, and explanations have felt like a dip feed. And then of course, he was making fun of our long pause when you were thinking about, and then of course Dwight comes in and says he hates those pauses. I think it depends. And here, Ronaldo actually adds a little something to this that I think will frame this conversation a little too. He says, "I'm personally enjoying it a lot." He did like The Last Jedi, and But anyway, I have issues with it, but it's a fun Clone Wars / Rebels live action season. It's a cartoon with real people in a good way, just like the prequels. Wow, so much to unpack there. Yeah, well, the problem is that you can't write a live action show like you do an animated show. You can't do that. And the problem is that is what Filoni is doing, not in a good way. It's just not really. There's a lot of things that I think that we talked about, and again, and this is what's funny, because I can actually say this even in season 5, right? One of the things that you and I both have said, even though we've torn on the show quite a bit ever since episode 1, we're enjoying it though. This is one of those shows where it's like you see there's a lot of problems and all that, but you're enjoying it. And to your point, honestly, I think that one of the things is that if you're going for the casual fan, then yeah, I think you do have to worry about capturing people and, making it so they don't tune off to another streaming show or something. With the hardcore fan, I think that you could do it a little differently, but here's the catch to that. So we're not going to be like casuals and just at the first slow moment or something change the channel or whatever. But we're going to be a lot more critical of the writing and the execution and all that stuff, because you're taking a beloved franchise that we love, and if you do something we don't like with it, it's not going to be a pretty sight. And I think that that's something that, I do agree that they need to start writing for hardcore fans. I think one of the problems that Disney has had is they have tried too hard to appeal to everybody. You and I talked about this a million times, where it's like you're trying to force what Lucas did naturally. Lucas did what he wanted. He didn't even care about the fans. His attitude was, I'm making the movies I want to make, and if you like it, cool. And he just happened to capture these timeless films and everything, and everybody loved it. But Disney is almost taking the opposite approach. It's like, okay, Star Wars is a juggernaut, so we're gonna, make this thing that everybody's gonna love, and as a result, nobody does. Like everybody's got problems with it. So Ronaldo rates it, the series so far. He says, for me, 7.9. And I mean, that's fair. That's fair. Dwight says, I agree, Ronaldo, it does have the feel of watching animation, which makes sense, animation where Dave has always been. And yeah, that's the thing. He goes on to say, Ronaldo, by the way, I love seeing Anakin with the red lightsaber. That was very cool. We'll be talking about that in a second. And 100% agree. If it's live action show, you can't write like a cartoon. Just so I'm kind of used to it by now. And then Dragonfly comes in and says, Thrawn and Ezra reveals will be the make or break moments for myself. And yeah, I mean, I think that the Thrawn thing is what we're waiting for. And then Dwight says, yeah, I'm used to it. Also, I kind of just see the story. And that's usually what we can do as well. there's been a lot of times where we've looked past. Trying to think, there's something that we always. Which one is it that we always bring up? Where we're like, oh, it's probably the Phantom Menace actually, where we're like, okay, it's a cool story. Like the prequels had cool stories with just poor execution, poor
Hmm.
performances, poor direction, poor a lot of things, poor writing in some cases. But the story was good. And I
Right.
think that that's the problem, though. As Star Wars fans, we're being asked to do that too much. It's like, well, they're Star Wars fans. They're just going to, because they love the story, right? It's like, well, no. Here's a news flash for you, Disney. We actually want to do more than just love the story. We want to love the show. We want to love the execution and the acting. We want it to be, like a real film, or a real show or whatever. Okay, so now before we get to the dessert, as you say, David comes in and says Anakin was wasted because Ahsoka can't act. Anakin was good, but was shackled by Ahsoka reluctantly clocking in. Long pauses.
I think
It's
I
either
think
when
here's the
we're
thing.
thinking or when we're reacting to David. Those are the two times we're going to be long pauses.
Okay, so Anakin wasn't wasted. I think he and this kind of goes right until we can start talking about the desserts, right? So I don't think Anakin was wasted at all. I think what it really showed is that, like, okay, the level of scope, like, okay, Anakin still had a lot to teach Ahsoka, and Ahsoka kind of felt like, well, on one hand, she's kind of like torn. What more do you have to still teach me? Because it's one, I'm still not like a Jedi, really. But the other part of it's like, dude, you went to the dark side on me, on everybody.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like I want to trust you, but I don't know how to trust you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the conflict of where all of this stuff stems from, David. Like, so when we talked about from episode 1 through 4, now I will agree with you, David, that, and I just said it not too long ago, the way that they portrayed Ahsoka as far as her being despondent or kind of in that sunken mourning space, I think they could have showcased that differently so it wouldn't seem so wooden. So I agree with you on that. However, it makes perfect sense of why she doesn't have those emotions that you would think as a main character she should have, because she's in mourning. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you know anything about her character arc is like, okay, she started off as this young, pipey little girl who was, okay, always trying to prove herself to her new master, Anakin. And then as she started to mature in her uh, um, in her career as a Jedi, she started to understand the casualties of war. And even in this episode, I love the fact that he said, like, look, originally we were keepers of the peace, but when you came along, like, we were in the middle of a war. So I couldn't teach you the way that it used to be. I had to teach you to survive now.
But there's Easter eggs there because, like I said, that was referencing her first episode, the whole Battle of
Battle.
Ryloth. But the
Hmm.
thing is that where that takes place, she had just trying to remember how it went. It was like I don't know, she took command or she did something of like all these cruisers and they got their butts handed to them. And
Hmm.
now, so I mean, that part I thought was really cool. The girl that portrayed the young Ahsoka looked exactly like, if you look at the animated version of Ahsoka from that
Man,
episode, it's like dead on, man. It's dead on.
yeah.
Even Ronaldo says the little girl that portrayed young Ahsoka was very good. She's getting a lot of jobs recently. I don't doubt it. I mean, it's one of those things where I think um that yeah, there was that dynamic, right? Where, and again, Anakin kept saying over and over, do you want to live? And, live or die. It's because it's trying to snap Ahsoka out of that. It's trying to be like, no, what do you really want? Do you want to just keep going like this, or do you actually want to do something? This is where she goes from Ahsoka the Gray to Ahsoka the White. And yeah, it's a Gandalf ripoff, but it's It's very poignant in that case.
Well, yeah, I like the fact that Anakin even tried to do different. He used different mechanisms to trying to get Ahsoka. Ahsoka initially, and I love this line when she said, I will not fight you. He
Oh
was like, I've
yeah,
heard that one
I've heard
before.
that one before.
Man,
Referencing the
dude,
Luke
like,
thing. I know that was so
yes.
awesome, dude. I mean,
I
I
was like,
about stood
that
up
was
and
phenomenal.
cheered when he did
Exactly.
that. And then of course
So
the other thing,
that
the
was great fan
juxtaposition.
service.
Yes, that was awesome fan service. But that's a good example of fan service done right.
Mhm.
Put into the story where it belongs. The other bit of fan service that goes along with that is when now, it's like he's going to use the dark side part of himself to, further the lesson or whatever. He does the same thing he did with Obi-Wan. He basically faced away from her. He had his back to her, and it was just like, it was kind of that reminiscent of the beginning of the episode 3 duel. And the other thing that I like too, that was another bit of fan service, was when, they were in that battle that actually took place during season 7 of it was when she goes against
the one
Darth Maul looking Mandalorians.
Caesar Mandalore.
Yeah. Well, of course Anakin was off, against
Mhm.
Dooku and all that stuff. And it was cool when he said, "Oh, I don't recognize this battle." It was like it's just like little things like that I thought were done very well, and they utilized it. I thought they utilized Anakin perfectly in this episode, actually. It wasn't too much, but it wasn't too little. It wasn't just, hey, here's Hayden Christensen again as Anakin Skywalker, which is kind of the vibe you got in the Obi-Wan series, actually.
Well, I like the fact that when we saw when they did pop up on their first with the Battle of Ryloth, he was actually dressed like we saw him in the Clone Wars, which I really liked.
Yes,
I
the
love
armor
that.
and the whole shot.
The haircut,
short hair.
everything.
Yep, I know.
I was just like, wow, like
The
that's
CG
really
actually
good.
wasn't bad in this, I thought.
It had its moments, but it was
did, but
was pretty
see,
good.
the problem that I had with the Obi-Wan thing is you had this like 40-year-old guy trying to play like a teenager, and he looked like a 40-year-old guy,
Exactly.
but just with the same hairstyle. And I'm like, all right, this is like totally taking me out of it. It's like, like some dad's pretending to be a teenager now. But this, they at least did the CGI in such a way, and they did do it a little differently. I mean, besides, the haircut and all that stuff, they got the face a little bit younger for those scenes. And then, of course, when he was the older version with the longer hair and stuff, they got that right too.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved how Anakin first when he cracked the joke and she was just like, he's like, what? And she's just like, he's like, look, I was just joking. She's like, well, how could you joke at a time like this? And it just really showed you how much she was battling with it. And all of this is predicated upon what Balin had told her during their battle. Everything about you has left death and destruction. So he was actually using the Force to see into, it's called Shatterpoint, and it's basically he's trying to figure out where's your weak point. What about you do you have where are you where you could be soft?
Yeah,
And
where you're vulnerable, basically.
yeah, and that happened. He did the same thing to Sabine. So the fact that was kind of like one of the last things that Balin had said to Ahsoka before she lost the battle, and then even Anakin kind of made the joke about it, like, well, the reason why you're here is because you lost. He's like, well, did I? He's like, no, trust me, you lost.
Exactly.
Like that was hilarious.
That was pretty funny. Yeah, that I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Well, let me get to this. I'm going to jump ahead on the chats a little bit because I want to get to this thing with David because this relates directly with what we're talking about. He says, so bad acting and fighting in a scene has no penalty. So Vin Diesel should be nominated for a Grammy. It'd be like an Oscar, actually. He's not singing. For gargling for 3 hours? Apparently, I need to go to film school because I'm crazy. David's like,
right.
Yeah, David's like, okay, man, he's out. You're fighting harder than Anakin right now, buddy.
So, hold on, bring his comment back up one more time. I just want to break this down just Okay, so bad acting and
Yeah, I'll leave
fighting
it up
innocent
there.
has no penalty. Has no penalty. Okay, where was the bad acting in? If we're talking about between Anakin and Ahsoka, where was the bad acting?
I'll wait.
And then, so Vin Diesel should be nominated for a Grammy for gargling for 3 hours. So once again, it's you have to understand that this is by design. If you're talking about Ahsoka, like this is by design. She didn't want to fight Anakin. She doesn't, and that was the whole point. That's the whole point why Anakin was getting on her case. The lesson he was trying to teach her ultimately was like you have to let things go. And that seems to be the quite frankly one of the threads that has gone all throughout Star Wars is letting certain things go. You can't hold on to certain things, which is why the
Exactly.
Jedi have this whole rule of like, we want you as a child because we don't want you to form attachments.
Right.
Because if you form those attachments, then you're going to it's going to dominate your destiny. And that's what happened with Anakin. That's what happened. And that's what he was trying to show her. Like, look, everything that I am, you are too. You have darkness in you too. The difference is, do you want to let it control you or do you want to live? That was the message.
And David responded with Ahsoka.
Right. I figured that's where he was going with it. So the whole thing is like, yes, she's fighting against this whole concept because she doesn't understand yet. So when he brings up the whole thing, like, well, she's like, well, yeah, you were the most powerful out of all of us, and you were dangerous. And he was like, is that what's bothering you? So obviously you haven't been paying attention the whole time. I've been trying to teach it to you. And so that's the whole message in this whole flashback scene, was to get Ahsoka to come out from being Wednesday Addams, basically, of Star Wars, and to put some life back into her, which is why when we see her as she becomes Ahsoka the White, now she's smiling, she's, hugging, kissing babies like Jason Solo, and I mean, not Jason Solo, Jason Syndulla, and
I just gotta know why
she's
White's gotta
cracking
be in
jokes with,
quotes.
I think you know why.
I think I know why. Just
So-
notice how, that's the desirable, that's the You know what though? Seriously? I just hope that Ahsoka stops crossing her arms every 5 minutes.
right.
I've often
Is
said,
that-
if you want to play like the ultimate drinking game, every time Ahsoka like crosses, folds her arms or whatever, take a shot, dude, you'll be obliterated like halfway through the episode. I promise you. Now, here's something that
I should try
Ronaldo
that.
brings up. And this goes a little bit into what we're talking about too with Anakin, right? Because one of the cool things, well, first he says, remember when they mix Anakin's and Vader's voice? That was cool. Yeah,
Man.
that was awesome. But what I really liked about it, besides how, the effect was the fact that it's showing that Anakin is actually drawing upon both of those. Like, sure, he's redeemed, he's good, he's, back to being a normal, Jedi, but he's calling upon that as like a lesson, that he can,
Yeah.
he's got that duality. He has that under control now. He can, because there was also, I mean, besides mixing the voices, don't forget you actually saw Vader in the shadows there for a second, like the suit Vader. And then
No,
it
one of the
disappeared and
things-
became Anakin.
Yeah, one of the things, oh my God, like every now and then Star Wars does something magical to me, and it's always something visual. So, Eric, you know this, like one of my favorite shots of all time was in The Force Awakens when we saw that TIE fighter like in the
In
sunset.
the sunset. Yeah, I got
Love
the
that.
picture of it right
Yep,
there.
right behind you.
Right. Oh, man,
So-
I'm so bad at this. Yeah, right there. I'm gonna
But-
stop pointing. I look ridiculous.
But the other one of the more beautiful shots to me was that scene where Anakin's leading the clone troopers, and he's got his saber out, and then he flashes into the Vader costume, and then back to Anakin. Love that.
Oh
When
yeah.
he comes out of the portal, and when he throws Ahsoka back into the world between worlds, and you hear the breathing, and then you see like the flashes of Vader. Absolutely phenomenal. I love that. And what it does is it kind of is like a quasi version of the cave, if you really think about it, from Empire Strikes Back, because it's one of those things where she's trying to face a fear. She doesn't
Mm-hmm.
want to end up like Anakin.
Right.
And that's part of her thing too. That's what's holding her back as well. Is the fact that she fears that, well, number one, she doesn't want to allow, because she has a lot of anger towards him because of what he's done. And she has a lot of guilt because what she feels like, okay, had I been there, had I not left him, maybe he wouldn't have turned this way. Maybe I could have stopped it. Maybe this, and what he's ultimately trying to say is like, everyone has these things in them, but what's going to be your destiny? What do you want it to be? Everyone has a choice. Anakin had a choice. And that's what he's trying to tell her. Like, look, everything that I am and everything that I, the good and the bad, you have it too. It's part of this lineage. And she didn't want to face that either. She's like, I kind of want to be like more like Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan didn't have these issues, but
Yeah, exactly.
But the thing is that, Ahsoka really has to learn, and it's kind of what she was trying to tell Sabine. It's like, you have to be you. You have to be your own person, but you have to live for yourself, but you have to keep fighting.
Right. Right. And that's what she had lost. She had lost that will to fight.
To fight, exactly.
And that's the thing. Now, Dwight brings up an interesting point. He says, Yoda assigned her to Anakin to help him with learning how to let go, if I remember correctly. Interesting, that is the lesson now, along with continuing to fight. And yeah. And then, of course, he goes on to say, yeah, the arm crossing is like a tick, just like Obi-Wan rubbing his beard. That's true. That's true. But here's the thing. Now, I don't remember her ever doing that in, maybe she did it in Rebels. I don't remember her doing the Clone Wars. But even if it is, it's not as excessive as it is in the series. Obi-Wan did not rub his beard to this degree, which doesn't sound good.
Well, to your point though, when we were talking about excuse me. You were just talking about how Ahsoka is. I lost my point that quick.
I can tell. Careful. They don't like long pauses out there.
I know, right? But I would just say this, is that when you really stop and look at it, Anakin was a central plot device to help make Ahsoka become, because this show is about her. And this is the thing that we've always wanted to know, because from the onset, we've always like, okay, well, where is she now? Because we haven't learned much about it. It seems like it's the Sabine show, quite frankly.
In the first 2 episodes, 100%. 100%.
And it's kind of like, okay, well, when are we going to learn more about Ahsoka and what she's been doing and what she's, what's motivating her? And the funny thing is like, she isn't motivated really. She's just kind of like existing, like you said, just kind of surviving. And this is actually getting her back to the point where she can actually become, I don't want to say useful again, but she's
engaged.
Almost like engaged. That's the word. And she's engaged. And I think that's what allowed her to even come up with the plan with the whole space whales.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? Because that's where everything takes a big shift. I mean, now it's like, hey, they find her, now she's Ahsoka the White. Now she's a little bit more engaged. Now she's like, man, what is it? What was that power where, she was holding the orb? Like Cal Kestis used it. What was the other Jedi that used it? It was another Jedi that would do that, where they would hold objects and, hear stuff or whatever.
Well, what's magic? Because they showed he was like a tracker.
Oh yeah, I do remember that.
Not Cypher Diaz. It's
no.
It's He was in the Clone Wars. The
Oh,
Clone Wars
I
episode.
think it
It's
was
dealing with the
Quinlan
Hutts.
Voss.
Quinlan Voss. There you go.
Yeah, it was
I couldn't think
Quinlan
of his name. Say
Voss.
him out.
Yeah,
Quinlan Voss.
there
Yes.
we go. That's it.
Where you can kind of pick up things and kind of like, all right, see what happened. It's
Yeah,
like a forced
yeah.
memory
So
or
that
a
was
flashback.
cool. That was cool. And then of course Dragonfly Mask. Thank you. Yeah, he chatted that in moments after we got it. Ronaldo says, "Do you think we'll see a similar scene with Luke,
What
like
scene?
another worlds between worlds thing, and now Luke kind of?" I don't
Oh,
think so because Luke is.
I don't think
Remember, he's
so.
alive. Like Luke's, I mean, she
Mhm.
could just fly and go see him. Because he says, I mean, okay, so he clarifies a little bit. He says, because if Anakin is able to talk with Ahsoka, I gotta believe he's able to do the same with Luke. Oh, I see. Like an Anakin Luke kind of thing. That would be cool. That would be cool, but it really wouldn't have a place in this particular show. At least not this
Well,
season.
not even that, but I don't think that. I don't think that would be relevant in a way
That's
because
what I
if you,
mean. It's like,
well, in the sense of because we see Luke later on in the sequel trilogy, he's disillusioned. Like right now, there's no problem with Luke as far as we know. Like he's fine.
yeah.
Like he did what he was supposed to do, so there's like almost no reason for him to be
Yeah, I know.
paid a visit by Dad.
I know. Ronaldo says, although it would be a little weird since they look almost the same age. Yeah, right. Okay, and then somebody new chatting with us, a guy who loves Star Wars. I love that name. What's up, guys? I'm absolutely loving the show, Ahsoka, and you guys. All right,
I appreciate that, man.
we do, and he even goes on to give us the name of that Force power, Force Echo. Yes,
there you go. Thank you,
Force
Thank
Echo.
You. See?
Thank you, guy who loves Star Wars.
Who loves Star Wars?
Yes. Dwight says, that's the thing. Nothing was motivating her. Another day in the life of someone who preferred to be a protector and not a warrior, but all her friends are soldiers.
Valid point, Dwight.
Very valid point. And then Dragonfly Mask goes, how does Anakin start a dialogue with Luke? That's got to be awkward.
Hey, boy.
Yeah, it's kind of like, hey, man.
He should do the Han Solo thing. Like, hey, kid.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that would be, again, that seeing the post Return of the Jedi Anakin Force Ghost communicating with Luke would be the ultimate. In fact, it would be very satisfying in the same way that the Yoda one was. Because the cool thing that we often talk about, Ronaldo's going to love this because we're talking about The Last Jedi now, but that whole scene between Yoda and Luke, where now Luke is a grandmaster, so he's kind of like a peer to Yoda, but he still has something to learn from him. So it was a different dynamic because Yoda was talking to him as like a fellow grandmaster, but at the same time, he's still teaching him something. That was just such a beautiful scene, and they could probably work something out like that between Anakin and Luke, because we only see Luke really interacting with Darth Vader, except at the very, very, very end. So it would be kind of cool, especially because you'd have Hayden Christensen as Anakin now, and that'd be kind of cool. And it would also make a little bit more sense that we see Hayden Christensen at the end of Return of the Jedi now. I mean, even though, I get what they were trying to do, but it would definitely bridge that gap, I think. Ronaldo goes on to say, I agree that it won't be relevant. Just curious that they never talked that we know of. I think we have to assume that they did, though. Don't you think that Anakin probably talked to Luke at some point during all this?
Maybe. It seems to be that what usually happens is the connection between masters and apprentice or Padawan.
Yeah.
So, it made sense that Obi-Wan would talk to Luke. It made sense that Yoda would talk to Luke.
He's his dad, though,
Yeah, but I mean, like, at this point, though, it's like he spent more time as a Sith than he did a Jedi. So it's kind of like, let's not just play catch up here. I mean, maybe it's possible. Sure, you might want to ask, okay, man, what the heck happened? I mean, that's got to be day one conversation. Like, okay, dude, like,
Oh
hey,
man, I
Dad,
can
and that's
totally see it now, right? It'd be like, well, Obi-Wan said, "Oh yeah, Obi-Wan would tell you that."
yeah.
It would almost be like when in Cobra Kai when Johnny was telling Miguel his version of the story.
What happened? That's the
Yeah,
story
of what
the
happened in
fight
the
between him
Karate
and
Kid.
Daniel.
Well, not even just a fight, but the whole thing. When he was talking
Oh,
about
yeah,
the whole
the whole-
stealing the radio, it was like basically he was narrating that whole movie, but from his point of view. And I think
The
that's
Lion
something
King 1.5.
yeah, pretty much. It's like, all right, man, look, first of all, the Empire was cool when it started. I mean, it was like I was duped by this guy. I was in a suit. I really didn't know what to do. I mean, yeah,
I
you can
lost your
clarify
mother.
some things. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, I didn't even know you were there. You were hidden by Obi-Wan. He's basically the source of all these problems. I mean, he can just like go on and on. And then, of course, Obi-Wan could pop up and be like, all right, look, that's what I'd want to see. I'd want to see the
Yeah.
conversation between Force Ghost, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and then Luke. That
Yeah.
would be funny.
Hilarious.
Guy who loves Star Wars says, I think for some reason Anakin can't become a Force Ghost since Return of the Jedi. That's why he's not around during the sequels or to help Luke during Ben Solo's fall. That is a good point, though, that we don't know. Yeah, he wasn't. You would think that's when he would be around. Now, I will say this, though. There was a
That's on
deleted
there,
scene.
yeah.
They were actually planning on having Anakin talking to Luke and then having Anakin kind of as like a Force Ghost mechanical Vader talking to Ben, or Kylo. So that, I don't know how that would have worked, but Guy who loves Star Wars says, and that's why Ahsoka has to die to see him. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I guess, in the world between worlds, it makes sense why he's there. Dragonfly Mass says, he brought up an interesting fact, Daryl. Anakin was a Jedi for maybe 13 years and a Sith for over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Little love from the Dragonfly. That was good. That's true. Because I didn't actually think of that either, that he really was a Sith for longer than he was a Jedi, so that makes sense. Ronaldo says, I would love to see Anakin and Luke talk about Padme. And Luke has literally never asked about his mother. Well, kinda. He asked Leia, and then Leia's all like lying, going, well, glimpses really. It's like, dude, you were like a newborn. You were handed
Maybe it was
off to,
Huang Jr.
yeah. It's like, what kind of glimpses are you getting?
It's probably from the Force.
No,
Well, she
of
said
course.
image. She's like, what she said, images more like feelings. I think that's what she said.
Yeah, jeez. These Skywalkers
So-
and their feelings, man.
I know.
But it was cool to see Ahsoka basically, now she's engaged. It's very much like the whole Top Gun thing, right? I mean, when Maverick, after Goose died, it just wasn't, his heart wasn't into it. He's going off on everybody and all that stuff. And then, of course, he re-engages in that final battle, and then he becomes the Maverick that we knew. And that's pretty much what I think is happening to Ahsoka at this point, is that now, she's re-engaged. And we also need to take a few minutes to say that Huang had some funny lines in this one.
Oh man, yeah.
Especially when Jason was all like, hey, could you train me to be a Jedi? No.
No. Do you know how to build a lightsaber? Yes.
Yes.
Can you show me? No.
He is by far, I don't think it's a stretch to say that he is by far probably the MVP of this series.
Well, when didn't he have another one when they were trying to fly into the mouth of the space was
Yeah, what did he
something like
say?
he said like you might want to get in here or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. He did say something like that. Yeah. So Dwight tries to clarify this whole Leia vision thing. He says Leia remembers pictures of her mom from the photo album and history books of her mom.
That's
You know
valid
what?
about
That's
that
actually
would make
that
make sense because she was a whole senator. So I mean,
but then it wouldn't really be images, really, unless you're, like just flashes or whatever. I mean, it'd be like, no, I saw, in page 364 of my galactic history book, which I'm sure Palpatine is still allowing to be taught, right? I mean, there is
Because he got
that.
to show his reign, right?
I don't know, but that is a possibility. I mean, who knows? And Bail Organa might have had some pictures, maybe a few compromising pictures. Well, actually, the whole thing is more like between her and Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I mean, overall, I mean, again, I thought the show, was it perfect? No. But it was definitely a step in the right direction. I think there was more wrong with it than right. And now, like you, this is interesting. I forgot to bring this up at the beginning of the show. You remember how you said that you watched it when you first saw it and you're like, I'm not really into this. This sucks. But then you watched it again and you warmed up to it and you realized it.
Yeah.
I actually only got to watch it once this time. And I didn't even get to, do my whole like note-taking thing like I usually do. But I watched it one time and at first I was like, I don't know about this. But then by the middle of the episode, I'm like, okay, man, I'm fully sold on this. I love all the nuances. I really enjoyed the whole Clone Wars thing. It was nice to see Rex in live action in his Clone Wars outfit. And obviously, there was the first wave. They were also the 501st, I believe, which is like Anakin's personal, like they're loyal to him. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just like stuff like that they're paying that much attention to detail. Now, granted, it's like Filoni doing it, right? And he's the guy that basically co-wrote or wrote this stuff. So it's not really a stretch to think that he's going to pay attention to those details. But nevertheless, it was great to see them there. So,
Absolutely. I love the attention to detail, like you said, what they did with Anakin, with how they got young Ahsoka right. I love how they showed, the different battles and the continuity of like, oh yeah, I don't remember this battle. It's like, oh yeah, you were gone. We had separated by
exactly.
then.
Just stuff like that,
it's like,
right?
Stuff like that was really good.
Ronaldo always comes in with something hilarious. He goes, Leia did say her mother was sad, so I guess they're sad pictures. All right, well, it's time for us all to give a number rating for this. Anybody who's watching this in the chats. I mean, hey, if you watch this afterwards, which I don't blame you because it's like past midnight here, so I mean, I'm amazed there's many people watching us this late at night, honestly. I want to thank you guys for, hanging in there with us. And, usually we'd like to go on at 8, but hey, I mean, who knows? Maybe this later time's actually better because more people can do it. I don't know. But we appreciate you guys hanging on. So chat in what your numerical rating, 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. Chat in what you guys think that this episode should be rated at. And of course, we'll chat in as well. And if you're watching this in the comment section, be sure to, put a comment in on what you thought of the episode, numerical rating, all kinds of stuff. All right, so they're chatting in their numerical ratings. Let's give ours. So go ahead.
8.5.
Yeah, I'll do that. I mean, I'll cheese out. I'll be that guy. Wow. We gave a higher rating than Ronaldo for once. Now, Ronaldo is still giving his special numbers. He gives it an 8.1, when it's just a little bit better than an 8. Dragonfly Mask gives it a 7. All right, so that's interesting, is that we're actually rating it a little bit higher than our audience this time. David, I'm sure, gives it a 1. Right. He's still around. Dwight. Yeah, right. Let's see.
Probably in the world between worlds at this point.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
That's what I'm going to be after I get off this podcast. Going to sleep.
Exactly. Got to go to bed. Get to the world between worlds. Dwight gives it an 8.5, so that's always cool. So I mean, everybody is though giving it around a higher rating, which is nice.
Mhm.
Nobody, because again, I mean, if David chats in, I'm sure it'll be very low. But for the most part, everybody is on par with that. Now, here's the next part that we always have to do before we go. Oh, David. Oh, I got to put this up. David actually gives it a 4. Gave it higher than I thought he would.
That's
All
about
right.
what I thought he would give it too, honestly.
Did you? I thought he was going to give it
Yeah.
lower. I honestly
No,
did, man. I thought it was going
I
to
figured he
be.
would have gave it yeah. I figured it would be like a 4.
I mean, don't get me wrong. It's still lower than what the rest of, the free thinking world is giving it, but that's all right. So now, here's the thing, and you guys in the chats, you can, give us your thoughts on this too. What do you now want to see in episode 6? What does episode 6 have to have in it for you to continue capturing your attention? I'm sure we're probably going to give roughly the same answers, but
I'm gonna say you got to see Thrawn and Ezra at this point.
Yep. That was
Thrawn Ezra has to, if you wait till the second to last episode to bring Thrawn and Ezra in, or even the season finale, that's going to be such a disservice to the fans. I mean, honestly, we thought we would have saw them by then. We need to see I know next episode we're gonna have to deal with Sabine, so that's probably going to be a Sabine heavy because this whole one was about Ahsoka. So the next one is probably going to be heavy on Sabine as far as what's going on, what is she finding out being on this giant Cheerio or hula hoop that they're flying through space in, and yeah, I think those are the main things that I'm looking for.
Yeah, I would say all that. Plus, I'm gonna say, I think Anakin, maybe he comes back in 7 or 8, but I don't think we're done with him yet. There's a couple of lines that he had said in the trailer. Of course, I know from Rogue One that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but there was some lines that he said in the trailer. I don't think we're done with Anakin yet. I think that there's still a little bit more to do there, and I wouldn't mind seeing that in 6, but I can understand if they hold that off until, like 7 or even 8. But Thrawn, Ezra, that's got to happen. They also started this whole thing with now Hera's in a little bit of hot water with the New Republic. And so, Mon Mothma was trying to like raid it and all that stuff. I'm very curious to see,
I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot how hilarious that whole thing was when Carson was trying to stall.
Yeah,
and he kept
that's
oh
right.
my god.
Oh man, I forgot all about that. And wasn't he kind of like, you're not gonna believe me if I tell you, or something like that?
He kept trying to he's kind of had like a little Poe Dameron thing going on at the time. He was kind of like, he's like, hello, and who is this? He's like, you know who this is? Like, why are we playing these?
Well, what's funny was he was kind of like the whole Poe Dameron thing, but he sucked at it.
Right.
Like he wasn't smooth at all. He was terrible.
Wasn't smooth or charming about it. He was just
No, but I could have sworn at the end though he said something like, all right, but you're not gonna believe me.
Yeah. And that was his thing. He's like, okay, what is going on down there? He's like, all right. You're not gonna believe this. And so then, when you see this giant, he's like, you guys might want to move out their way.
Oh man, that was the best. That was the best when he said that. I mean, actually, because Carson, he's another one. He's been in The Mandalorian. He's kind of one of those like recurring side characters, but I always liked him. He's always kind of funny.
He's kind of cool.
Yeah.
He tries to be cool and not be a jerk, but at the same time, he's still trying to keep his job and his rank.
Right.
Right.
He's actually a really interesting character, I think. All right, let me get to some of these chats before we wrap it up. Ronaldo says, the good thing is that even if we have issues, the great majority of fans are enjoying this show. And I mean, I think that that's one of the big differences between this and a lot of the other ones, right? Is that, it's like I said, I try to catch a lot of different YouTubers' views on the show. And a lot of times they're the same. Like they really liked episodes 4 and 5. They had a lot of issues with episodes 1 through 3. But even beyond the issues, everybody sees the potential and everybody is enjoying themselves through this thing. So that's cool. Ronaldo goes on to say, I want to see Thrawn. Dragonfly Mass is telling us, look, Thrawn or Ezra, I don't want to hold off until the last episode. Dom joins us again. He's like, Zero, haven't even seen the show. Way to keep up there, Dom. Dwight says, time to see the head Smurf, and Sabine has some explaining to do.
That's right. La, 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 la.
Dom's like, I'm waiting for the next movie.
We'll be waiting till 2025 for that one.
That's what Ronaldo said. He's like, you'll be waiting a long time. Yeah, you're gonna be like out of school, man. You're gonna be
out of college.
Out of college, yeah, by the time the next movie hits. I'm sorry to say. I think the next movie is gonna take a while. And that's something that we'll probably start talking about soon. Now we don't Monday's show, we're probably gonna have to pre-record it. It's another one of those gotta work like through the night things. But we'll do the premiere again, and we'll do the thing to where, we're chatting in. So, not sure what we're gonna talk about yet. We haven't actually picked the subject for it yet, have we?
Not yet.
I didn't sleep through that or anything like that? Okay. Just checking. Because there's been times where I've forgotten, where it's like, oh, don't you remember? We were gonna... It's like, okay, whatever. But just check us out Monday at the usual time, for Monday, 8 o'clock. We'll premiere a video. Everything will be cool. Next Friday, I think we could do it live again, because we do it at like 11 o'clock at night. So I think I might be okay. But obviously, we're going to have a lot to unpack with episode 6. I have a feeling that episode 6 is going to be just as prominent and important as episode 5. So hopefully you guys can join us for that. All right. So other than that, don't forget to hit that like button. If you guys haven't done so already, it does help us out. We really appreciate you guys' participation. Hit subscribe if you haven't done so, the notification bell, so you guys know, especially the way our schedule is, that notification bell is going to help you out quite a bit. Join our Discord. There's a lot of stuff. Just check the link in the descriptions. You can do the buy me a coffee thing. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff we got going on. So until Monday, even though we won't be live, we'll be here. So until then, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the force be with you, always.